If you're recording, I'd like to put on the record that I'm very scared.
He's here. Home.
It is a bad vibe.
No, I'm not,
I do think that's probably not great.
When you start getting into the world of the paranormal, you meet people with amazing and fantastical experiences. You meet people who have come face to face with cryptids and monsters and aliens and other entities that we don't even have names for. And as soon as those people start to talk about what they've experienced and what they've seen, there's a part of society that is immediate to shout them down and say, that's fake, that doesn't exist, that couldn't have happened. And I think whether it's because their understanding of science is limited to the things that they learned in high school, or because their faith or their religion told them these things couldn't possibly exist, I think the idea that the world might be bigger and more magical than they've given it credit for is terrifying. That's true about the paranormal, but it's also true about my gender identity. I think it's really easy for people who haven't had a lived experience to just say, that's fake and I'm never gonna think about it again. I think that there's something magical about being trans. And I don't mean that in a metaphorical way, although that's also true. There's an understanding in the paranormal that hauntings or magic or anything that we would call high strangeness is drawn to liminal spaces like hotels and prisons and schools and train stations. And it got me thinking about how the paranormal might interact with or be drawn to liminal identities. I'm a non-binary trans person. I'm a mixed race person. My entire identity is in many ways permanently liminal. And when you start looking at pre-colonial societies from all around the world, people who, while you can't call them trans because that's anachronistic, but people who existed outside of the Western idea of a gender binary were not only accepted and welcomed in so many of these societies, they were seen as mystical and magical. We were shamans and spiritual advisors, seen as occupying this real world and also a spiritual paranormal world based on our liminal identities. I think that this is our space. I think that in the same way that we are drawn to this thing, and sure, you can say it comes from a place of kinship, of being othered, of being seen as on the margins or seen as villainous in the same way that these creatures are, but I think it goes beyond that. I think there's something intrinsic to this identity that calls out to the strange, and I think the strange calls back out to us. So my goal here is to find people like me who feel drawn to something that is bigger and weirder. And then with the help of those people, I want to find that bigger, weirder thing.
Okay, are you still rolling?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
I feel it happening.
If you want to just press the button on the bottom until there's a blue light, that's how you know it's on. It's like a lot of like that.
There's a lot going on that I'm not going to try.
Pause for a second. Ooh. Cool. I don't have a. No, I mean that's pretty good. Let's try a couple different versions.
Yes, and what if I'm like, okay. It's me, Rosa. I'm Rosa. I'm a friend of Dash's. We host a psychic advice podcast together, which I originally joined on for a joke. However, it came out that I actually had psychic experiences when I was a child. So when they started getting really into the paranormal, I kind of came along as a way of figuring out my own abilities, and I'm really interested in understanding what's out here and what we can learn from this process.
I am Rockette Fox. I am a biracial Korean-American, queer, bi-furious, witchy woman who is super thrilled to be here. I initially met Dash via a role-play stream during the time of lockdown, which was an absolute blast. And after commiserating over similar haircuts and tattoo styles, I was really excited to hear about the project, coming from the perspective of somebody who is both a minority in majorly white spaces, but also somebody who is a intuitive and connective witch. There's really something to be said about connecting with the paranormal, which also falls outside of a lot of normal spaces as well. And that's been something I've always been super interested in. So I'm super thrilled to be here.
We're looking at American queerness, and I wanted to start with what I think is the quintessential American ghost story, which is why we came here to Adams, Tennessee to look into the Bell Witch. First settled in the 1790s, the city of Adams is located 45 minutes outside of Nashville. And though it experienced a highway boom in the early 1920s, the city is primarily known for being the location of America's first major ghost story, the haunting of the Bell family. At some point in 1817, when the city of Adams was still new, family patriarch John Bell and his son Drew would fire weapons at a strange dog-like creature, unwittingly kicking off a haunting that would last for the rest of John Bell's life. Legends say that the name Bell Witch was given by President Andrew Jackson when he and his men spent a terrifying night on the farm, though the entity called itself Kate. This led many to believe that the root of the haunting was a local woman named Kate Batts, who was on bad terms with John Bell, though she denied this allegation consistently. In 1820, after 3 years of torment, both for John and his daughter Betsy, the patriarch died. The family believed that he was poisoned by the Bell Witch itself. To start our investigation, we decided to speak with Bell Witch enthusiast Caroline Moore and Adamstown historian Tim Henson.
Supposedly, 2 or 3 of the Bell children, maybe Drury, I can't remember the others' names, were digging around down in, there's mounds all by the river, and got a skull, brought it to the house. John Bell found out and made them take it back and bury it, but supposedly, according to the legend, one of the teeth fell out of the skull and went through a crack in the floor on the porch. And supposedly they couldn't find it, but they blamed that. And then an experience down by the river, they were digging for a treasure, and I don't remember what happened exactly, but something like that caused it. But the spirit said it was the spirit of Kate Batts, whether that was true or not, but Kate was still alive.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting because, yeah, it definitely seemed like they were looking for women to be the scapegoats in both of the situations with Kate as well as Betsy, because it was like, because you could be like, well, if Betsy broke off her engagement with Joshua beforehand, like the dad wouldn't have died.
She was supposedly had a love interest in the Gardners, Joshua Gardner. And the witch, spirit, whatever you want to call it, tried to stop that. And the legend always has that no Gardner's ever to marry a Bell.
But then you also look at it the other way with, I honestly think it was this Richard Powell guy that created this elaborate hoax.
Richard Powell had a wife, and I know the book says he was a bachelor and he was pursuing Betsy. Well, if he was at that time, A, she was awful small, and B, he had a wife. He married an older widow woman who was considerably older than him from Williamson County, down below Nashville. And she conveniently died in 1821, and she was about 38. Richard was 7 or 8, 10 years older than Betsy. So at that point, supposedly, he began his interest. He was her teacher, for one thing, which happens today, but most people don't want to talk about it.
He's already 10 years older, so that's already predatory. And then he was also her teacher, which is just adds another element of predatory behavior. Right after Betsy had broken off the engagement, Richard's wife also died the same year. And so that's where it adds this kind of element of like, I think he was just a creep. And then when you find out that while she ends up in the relationship with him, he is abusive. I think he was just very possessive, and then that also kind of manifested in a possession in a very strange way.
We're talking about a dark time in our history, and you went to bed when it got dark. You didn't have a bunch of headlights or outside lights or whatever. You might have a candle to carry to your room, and a lot of superstition, a lot of little education. Most people couldn't read, including Lucy Bell. I proved that she couldn't read and write. And so stories were told to scare the children, make them go to bed, and then some of them believed it. And weird noises that happened in the night, whatever it was, they blamed it on something, and of course the spirit got credit for that. But
there was a lot going on, and I think that also could have manifested in a haunting. But I also think this Richard Powell guy, he clearly educated, so I think he managed to kind of sneak his way in. And finagle that, unfortunately.
What are the main sort of inconsistencies or misconceptions you find that people who come in here to ask you questions about this, what are the things that people get wrong?
Well, I don't think people think of it as a real family, and it was. And the characters in Ingram's book are all real. And I've looked up almost all of them and researched their families, interviewed tremendous lines of the Bells and the Guns and the Forts and all the neighbors. And they want to come in here and have something floating around on a broom. And the witch was nothing of that nature. Supposedly a spirit, which I don't understand, but the Bible talks about spirits, so I can't say it didn't happen, didn't exist.
I don't know, because it sounds like witches always has like a negative connotation, and it always seems very anti-woman. I think that's kind of the thing, is like you're usually like, it's like I grew up in Massachusetts, like Salem witch trials. It was like they just went after the women that they didn't like. And so I think like calling it a ghost is leaves it a little bit more open.
Then I learned as I began to research, because I've written a book now, that I was living on the James Tunt's gun farm, which was a brother-in-law of John Bell Jr. So connection there, and that's where I saw the first orbs on that farm. I still don't have an explanation, but they're weird-looking balls of light that bounce across the...
So yeah, tell me about the orbs you saw on the farm specifically.
Well, I was looking out the back door of the farmhouse where we live, and the moon was pretty bright, which was unusual. And out of the woods back there, all of a sudden I see these look like basketball size, to me, orbs of light bouncing across the field coming toward the house. And at some point they dissipated, and I didn't think a lot about it, except later on when I was talking to people. And the second round of orbs was right here in this school building. Somehow they thought I could do something, I guess. But they called me one night, it's about 9, 10 o'clock, and said it's going on, and we saw her again. I said, what do you mean you saw her? Well, we saw the little girl, green dress, blonde hair, coming down the stairs from the upper auditorium. And then she dissipates. And I said, well, what do you want me to do about it? He said, well, you get here. Something's going on. He said, I said, well, I'll come. I don't understand what I can do. But when I drove up, every light in that building was on. I mean, like somebody turned everything on. Every door was open. So I just go straight in the front doors, and I'm hollering for their, where are you? What's going on? And they're not there. So I come around to the side door right in front of that van there, and I look out toward Bellwood Cemetery. And there's those dadgum orbs that I hadn't seen in about 20-something years. Coming across the field, bouncing like basketballs, and then they dissipate. And then the guys come back, and I said, where have you all been? This thing was wide open. Lights are all on. He said, they said, we've been over to the cemetery. I thought you were scared, you know? People are crazy.
So we started talking to Tim to just get some historical background and just sort of get grounding on the case. We learned just some of the history. We also, one really interesting thing that Tim mentioned was these orbs that he had seen. The orbs are interesting because they're sort of more traditionally associated with UAP and UFO phenomenon, which I think is really interesting with some stuff that happened during the investigation that I hadn't really put together until later. But yeah, we just got a sort of historical grounding from Tim. We learned who was and was not a pervert. I will ask you, so later on tonight when we're going to be in there trying to do some of our investigation stuff, you said you have some objects in there. Is there anything specifically that you think is worth spending some time with? Is worth looking into?
There's Joel Bell's false teeth are in there.
Okay.
And I didn't want them.
Yeah, I can't blame you.
They're under glass, but I could pull them out where you could film them good.
You don't got to pull them
out.
Well, I mean,
I would, and I'll tell you right now,
I did,
I'd actually prefer that you didn't.
I did last week for
right.
this guy that was doing the book.
For a real pervert, huh?
Well, no, he's writing the book. He's Dr. Rick Gregory. He's not a pervert.
I just making a little joke, but I appreciate
Well,
it.
whatever floats
I'd
your
probably
boat.
touch the tooth.
You'd touch them?
I would touch the tooth.
All right.
I mean, I don't need to for any reason, but like I would if it was a thing.
We started, we talked to Tim, we got a historical background, and then we did our investigation that evening at the Adams Museum itself. We did a tarot read, and the focal card that we got was the Emperor in reverse.
The Emperor, the fourth card in the Major Arcana, drawn in reverse. Emperor makes an annual pilgrimage to his ancestor's grave, as did his father before him and his father before him, and will his son after him, if he lives to see that day. The Emperor wields the traditional scepter of his office, his father's walking stick. The Emperor is author and authority. His name is displayed prominently, and his name is his father's name, a name brand. For some querents, the Emperor denotes a leader or a father, a male figure to look up to and listen to, who manifests his will and holds full authorship. And for others, the Emperor is an oppressor, a dominator, an exploiter.
The Three of Wands. The Wanderer, foraging, wends away through wasteland and finds utility in what others have discarded. Through effort and enterprise may salvage of a savage landscape become a skillful art. Keep to a plan, and perspicacity will be rewarded. Don't just stand there. Step swiftly, speak softly, and gather big sticks. You've found the path, and now are tasked to proceed down it.
The Eight of Wands. A time for motion, action, and change. Make haste toward that which bears fruit and promises harmony. Leave behind what won't be needed where you are going. Your greatest wealth is in talent and skill. Messengers travel light, the better to swiftly deliver their messages. Run to meet them on the road and speed the process further. Rapid communication will come to your aid.
In this reading, I think it's really interesting that we got two wands and a Major Arcana card. Wands are sort of a creative suit that are about action and creative action. I think it's interesting that we're sort of put in the direction of we're on a path, we're moving towards it. The path is fruitful, that we found it and we're working towards it, and the path maybe is moving towards a better understanding of this Emperor figure, this reverse Emperor, who to me reads as a very John Bell thing.
I honestly think it's just interesting that all of them have sticks. Mine says to speak quiet or
Gather sticks.
yeah. Carry. I think it says carry a big stick in there actually. Yeah, or gather sticks.
Gather big sticks.
Gather big sticks. So I do think it's interesting that all of them have sticks in this space. So I'm not sure exactly what it means yet, but I do think that that's an interesting pull for this.
Yeah, and particularly what spoke to me about this one is the idea of moving towards something fruitful and the emphasis being on communication.
Yeah.
Something is going to be communicating, things like that.
Not just an entity, but we're literally communicating with a lot of interesting people in this town, specifically tomorrow. So we're communicating both in a sort of greater paranormal sense and in like a person-to-person sense, which I think is really interesting too.
it started out really, really weird to begin with because we set up, we were filming in the museum proper, like the museum with all the displays, and Rosa heard a sound from my bag that I had all my gear in. So, so we're, again, the Adams Museum is full of a lot of interesting stuff just from the town of Adams. There's a lot of relics from a racist age, hidden in plain sight. Spot them if you can. This is the part.
Something fell in your bag.
Do
you hear that?
Yeah.
What? Should I check what
Just
fell?
on its own?
Well, inside the bag. I don't know what fell.
Did you bump it?
No.
That's creepy. Okay.
Sorry, I just heard.
No, I want you to say when that stuff happens. It's probably one of the lamps.
Just the lamps. Looks
Okay.
like one of them fell on the other one.
Yeah,
All right,
well,
nothing
that's-
broken.
No, but that is spooky though.
Is there something we can do using a lamp?
Do you think we should turn off the lights? You said. Hey,
Yeah, no, we can.
They said give them something spooky.
All right, Rosa, turn off the light. And so Rosa is like, oh, that means we should turn the lights off, which I agree with, but I was also like, I don't want to be in a dark. It's like, it's creepy. It was a creepy room, and I was like, I don't want to be in the dark.
I do feel extra spooky.
We went there with the intent to contact the Bell Witch entity, and I don't think that we did it all that first night. We tried the Estes method. We started with Rosa. So the Estes method is a method of communicating with who knows, pioneered by Connor Randall and Carl Pfeiffer on a series called The Spirits of Stanley. It is a method of using a spirit box to communicate without the confirmation bias that's traditionally associated by putting one member of the team in a sort of state of sensory deprivation where all they can hear is the spirit box itself. The rest of us will be asking questions that they, in this case Rosa, cannot hear, and we'll be seeing what comes through. You didn't really pick up anything.
I actually really like the Estes method in general because I usually do pick up something. I've had some really great times with the Estes method. This one I got little to nothing really.
Fox jumped in on it too and didn't really pick anything up, and then I got in it, and it was immediately like extremely responsive.
Do you feel okay?
I'm doing slowly.
Do you feel like
Send it down.
Is it taking you a moment to learn how to use this?
Send the ghost to the policy. Identify things.
Do you want to tell us what you are?
Tell you.
Tell us.
Were you ever a human?
He's here. Home.
Are you here in this
Turn it out. I'm not. Teacher would essentially
Teacher. Are you talking about Richard?
back out on the kids.
Or are you talking about Tim? Are you talking about Richard or are you talking about Tim? There's a teacher here in the museum.
The house is jaded. You think this is social? Hey. Try. Be on the floor. Chaos is hard.
It is.
It's hard. Do you want us to be on the floor? Oh, we got a little bit up. We have a 1 and a 2.
Are you closer to the floor?
Lose freedom. And that is what he's saying.
Who lost their freedom?
He just...
Oh, it's at 1. Are you close to me now that we're on the floor?
1, 2.
Oh, okay, yeah. I saw this go to 1 and 2. Is that you?
I'll betcha.
What will you bet me? Are you something that likes tricks?
Something. And the Lord.
Well,
Incident.
what happened?
Did you go to the church around here? Do you remember going to church? Did you ever sing in the church here?
Well, each of our ghosts is finished.
There's no more ghosts here?
Based a bit the teeth.
Did you...
Still is in there.
Oh, wait.
We have an opening.
I got a 1. 1 sec.
In there.
Did you mention the teeth earlier?
A cage.
Yeah, a box around the teeth?
Season. It's 2 ways. Who's every day? I'm confident.
What are you confident of?
That was me. That was me.
How are you feeling?
Yeah.
Uh,
You had some wild stuff coming out there.
That's true.
yeah. So a really weird thing happened. Rose, why don't you hit that light on, huh?
Yeah, I'm gonna put the light.
There are points, so it starts off as just sort of chill and a little responsive. I say some interesting things about like God, and I say some interesting things about like a teacher, at which there was teachers in the lore.
Yeah.
But then I say the words "he's here," and like my entire body, I just felt dread.
Full body dread. Like my entire body felt like bad and scared, and I felt like I had to stay in because it felt like this is like what we're doing, but I was like, I don't want to be in this right now. I don't want to be in this right now. And I'll tell you, it felt playful in like a really shitty male way.
Like a shitty dude bro was talking to you?
So try being on the ground, I remember saying, and then something about losing freedom. And it felt like proud of getting you all to sit down. Do you know what I mean?
This is the interesting thing as far as UAP is concerned, because one of the things that happened consistently in the Point Pleasant area during the Mothman event and all the sort of UFO flaps there are just these like places of dread where like the human reaction is to just feel dread in your whole body. And like Keel talks about this in the book where he'll be like, and he felt it and he's like, I have to run. Like I have to get out of here.
In Keel's Mothman prophecies.
In Keel's Mothman prophecies, yeah. But it's common with other contactees too for that whole flap is just this instantaneous and like seemingly artificial feeling of dread, which I hadn't put that together until I was thinking about it later. But I just, again, full body, I felt.
But it felt very responsive to what you all were saying.
More so than I think any of the other ones.
The other two, honestly, I didn't feel like I was getting
from either.
I personally, when I was in it,
I felt like something was there, but wasn't super interested in like
I didn't think anything
talking through me.
was there for me. I like maybe there's some cool hits, but I really didn't feel like there was that much there.
I felt like that at first. It almost felt like a meandering, playful feel when I started, and then as soon as whatever that he's here, which again feels a lot like an emperor in reverse, when that showed up, it just, again, it felt like I almost like I had this like I have to stop this, but I was like I can't stop this now because it feels like we're like in this feels I am feeling something for the first time in this session.
Well, that's interesting too because when I was doing it, I felt like something was there. But
Right?
It was more of like playing with like
Yeah.
Oh, I can flip
Oh, a
through
cool
these, that's
toy,
fun.
whatever. Yeah.
Like, you know, and that's kind of the sense that I got, but it was not particularly interested in saying anything with it. It was just like, oh, what do we have here? So.
This is weird, but I kind of want to jump back in.
Yeah, jump back
I kind of want to jump back in and just see if
it.
anything else comes out, and maybe it won't. But
Go for it.
I kind of want to jump back in.
Do you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
After that, we went upstairs to the theater space to do, and I felt like I should do it again because I felt like I had like the biggest connection.
Yeah, I think also me and Fox, because we like you had such an intense connection, we're like, nah, like we're not, it doesn't even seem worth it for us to do anything tonight, so.
going to sleep.
Sorry, did we wait too long, Spirit? We wanted to be in the little candy store downstairs.
Idiots.
Well,
Have you ever been down there? It's pretty cute.
Dick around
well,
Well,
it's really cute,
We are
though.
here
in front of you.
Are you here in front of
that's
us?
fair.
Should we be watching what's in front of us on the stage?
Performing. I promise that you'll get details. More coming.
When will we get details?
And then,
When will
fess up.
We went up there and it felt really commanding, which was similar, but the whole energy felt different. It felt really collaborative. It felt very theatrical. It felt like we were dealing with, we were calling it like gay director ghost the whole time.
Yeah,
so
the
it was
gay
a joke.
director ghost I loved. It's like an old school auditorium, and it's where they put on the Bell Witch play every year. So it's like they do a play there every year. So it's like, you know, an old school auditorium. You said we're gonna
The stage.
You're on the stage.
The stage is for any of us.
Would you like to perform?
Feel this.
Do you want us to get on the stage with you? Is it for us too?
The intention to devour.
Maybe stay off the stage.
Respect. Respect.
Will we be safe if we go on the stage with you?
I dig it.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
That's not totally an answer,
know?
but
It was okay when we came. We sat on the floor with you. So
I felt it in myself.
what do you want me to do on the stage? Okay, I'm on the stage. Are you on the stage with me?
is there anything you'd like to have happen?
The best. The stage. Now.
Okay, fine.
Too much fun.
And we started in the seats, and at one point, I think the most directional thing was like, get on, like get up,
Like
get
the
on,
stage.
like
The
the
stage is
stage.
for
The
everyone.
stage is, yeah. So I went on first, and Fox didn't, and
Fox didn't because I had also said like I think Fox had said why the stage or what's the purpose, and I said to devour.
What usually happens on the stage? Dash the spirit was creeping up.
Oh, that's
I
fair.
was feeling the stage go, and I was like, I'm gonna open this, and they're gonna be in the seats, and I'm gonna lose my goddamn mind.
Oh no.
Yeah, no. We're
Well,
we're creeping on. That's us. We're creeping.
It kept asking to get on the stage. Yeah, it was an interesting one. We did both end up getting on stage. There was also a lot of bees,
A lot of hornets.
a lot of hornets
Hornet nests on the stage.
on the stage. So not great.
Here's what's really interesting to me, and here's what it felt like to me. Downstairs, when I felt like it was giving you commands, I felt deeply unsettled. Up here, it felt like a director. It didn't feel like a domineering, commanding, like just mean person. It felt like, be a part of this, I'm gonna tell you what to do. From my perspective. From the end, like what it felt, I didn't feel bad body-wise in the way that I did down there. This felt like a very, do this with me, like come along, like doing whatever. This felt safe in a way that downstairs didn't. This, to me, from my side of things, this felt, I don't know how to explain it. It just felt, this is hacky and stereotypical, but I've said in this that I think the paranormal is a queer space, and I'm making that argument. The theater is a queer space, and I don't have to make that argument. That's always been true. And this felt like more like, this felt like a space that's sort of ours to begin with, and whatever because it did feel like something was talking to me, and there were a couple of real weird moments where I just like, you know how you can tell when someone is standing directly behind you?
Well, someone was, it was me.
But far before that, like right towards the beginning, before any of the stage stuff happened, there was a lot of this like, I feel like I don't feel alone, but not in a threatened way, in the way that I didn't feel alone downstairs. So that was really interesting. We came here with the idea that it's object-based, right, and it's location-based, and this is a Bell Witch space, and I think what we really learned is this is a John Bell space. This is a Bell family space. We're really close to the Bell family cemetery. All of this entire sort of building is orchestrated in a way to tell the story from the perspective of John Bell. And if we were gonna get into something real, I don't think the Bell Witch is in this space. I think if anything's in this space, I think it's John Bell, I think it's the Bell family, I think it's that line of sort of patriarchal continuance, that emperor in reverse, right? And I think I have some really cool people lined up for us to meet tomorrow who are just like queer and trans people from Tennessee who live in the Nashville area and sort of surrounding. And I think it'll be really cool to see what they have to say about like local queerness and local magic. And I think that's really gonna help steer us in some directions in terms of how to do that investigation. But to follow sort of your two polls about picking up the path and finding the path and moving down the path, I think this is telling us that it's not about, we're not gonna find this in the Bells. We're not gonna find this in the sort of the Bell space. We're gonna find, if we're trying to make contact with this being, the Bell Witch, we're gonna have to go outside of this space.
For our second investigation day, we headed to Nashville, where I had lined up a series of interviews with queer and trans people with magical spiritual practices in order to get a better understanding of what queer Southern magic actually is. We had planned to finish the day with another investigation out at the Kings Bluff Cliffs, located in Clarksville, Tennessee, on the same limestone deposit I had been told was associated with the Bell Witch. I had hoped our interviews would help us make sense of our investigations that evening, but there was no way I could have anticipated how those two paths would converge, pulling us into a ritual we had no idea we had already begun performing.
Tennessee's complicated. I know everything's complicated, but Tennessee is just very weird. Put it this way, when I was in college, when I talked to other freshmen, depending on what part of the country they came from or what part of Tennessee they came from, they would say, this is the most conservative place I have ever lived, or this is the most leftist place I have ever lived. There's no in between.
It's the first time I've ever lived in a place where really intense evangelical right-wing views were more mainstream.
Luckily, my parents growing up were very real with me about the world, so they're like, it's going to be hard for you because you're not a man, you're not white, you're not this, you're not that. So I've always had a very practical view of those things.
I mean, again, not like people haven't called me fag on the street before, but it feels a little scarier here because I feel like it is supported very much by the culture and by the government.
Nashville has a larger spiritual community than most people would think.
Right.
And what I have witnessed is more people coming together, and they're coming out more and being a little more vocal about who they are and what they want.
The reason I kind of broke away from the church, like a lot of gay trans people, was because of being gay and being trans and just kind of like homophobia, transphobia.
You know, if it's not going to be acceptable, then it's sort of like being pushed out of the church and a certain religion. So
it's always like, are they gonna like the part of me that is gay? Are they gonna like the part of me that is this, that is that?
I really struggled as a young person to even want to have anything to do with anything that looked like faith at all. And I've always had a sort of like internal bristling towards group joining and like believing in stuff, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna like join this belief system. And, you know, at some point in my life, particularly in my 30s, after I started to be dealing with like chronic illness and stuff, really had to like reinvent what faith means and divorce it from like the Catholic Church, for example. You know, this is like my lineage.
And then, but that evolved over time. I mean, now my path is more American folk magic, a little bit of hoodoo oriented. So it took me back to the Bible.
I am bad at religion. And also, again, because there's a lot of complicated politics around immigrant identity from countries like Myanmar, where they came from, you know, like violent diaspora and stuff like that, and around assimilation to whiteness in America and assimilation to survive. And so we were sort of told growing up, like, I mean, we would do Burmese things, but we were told we needed to be like, you know, quote unquote real Americans. So we weren't taught the language. I wasn't really taught the prayers, but we were still expected to do certain things, like still expected to not eat pork, expected to observe certain behaviors, certain kinds of filial piety, stuff like that. And honestly, like, a lot of it was sort of not good. And I kind of grew up bucking that a lot.
I'm trying to learn to bring them together because I obviously still have a very strong connection to God, but just trying to figure out how I can bring my craft and him together, because I was taught for so long that magic is of the devil and it's bad, so it's not supposed to do with God.
Accepting myself and not like seeing who I am as like sin has just kind of like opened my eyes to like what is not sin that is part of the world and what is just like humanness. And it has made me kind of like appreciate the world and open up more, if that makes sense.
A low vibe, like negative expression of faith is certainly like giving over your power to authority without questioning. But an internal experience of faith is really about like having wonder and reverence for the incredible enormity of the universe and all of nature and the world, and like not being so narcissistic to think that you know everything all the time.
We call ourselves Episcopagan.
It's just like this general, I don't even want to say apathy, just non-existent awareness that that could even be a possibility. And I think that speaks to a lot of queer experience in the South, but also specifically queer spiritual experience and magical experience.
Sometime in the queer community, we don't feel accepted in society, and we don't fit into these rules and these norms. And in magic, I don't have to fit into those either. So, you know, that is a place I can be myself and do things my way and experience spirit and energy and magic in my own way. And I don't have to follow anyone's rules, so.
I don't think I ever think about it, except for maybe a positive of having a balance of masculine and feminine energy.
Sure.
Other than that, I've really never thought about how it affects it.
I think it affects me more, you know. It's like when I'm working at my altar myself, doing my own magic and whatever, you know, I got my gay on. You know, that's me right there. So.
And I was sitting by a river one day and I just heard a voice very clearly, and that wasn't the first time I've heard a voice. That was like, why have you been putting this off your whole life? Like, you know you're a witch, you know you're supposed to be looking into these things, bettering yourself, looking deeper, and then from there, here I am.
I think like all trans people are inherently like master manifestors, even if they have no idea about that or a relationship to it, because at least in my sort of definition or view of manifestation, it starts with a felt experience. It starts with emotion and being connected to a certain energy. And as far as my understanding of manifestation goes, that's step one, you know? So like for trans people, we are people who have the sort of like courage and inner connection to ourselves enough to embody felt states and emotion states that we're not supposed to, and sort of like buck that, and then also bring that into being.
Jael shows up, and I went out to the parking lot to greet him, and he brought me a little jar with a flower in it. And he's like, hey, I brought you a flower, which like really sweet and just a nice surprise.
From his garden too.
From his garden that he had grown.
Flower. Very nice. Very sweet.
We didn't really get it on film, and I was talking to Andy about this, and Andy was like, I wish I had a second camera to have been like following you the whole time.
Yeah, because
it's also funny too. Go ahead.
Andy had already set up with me, and we were like waiting where we were like gonna all meet up together.
I talked to Andy about this, and as I was walking out to greet Jael, Andy had a thought where he's like, oh, I wish something's gonna happen that I should be filming. Like literally, Andy was like, something's gonna happen. I should be filming this somehow. Like he knew. Like he just knew.
On it. This is, I think, where it gets a little.
It starts to get cool.
It gets a little wild.
Yeah.
Jael sets off a snowball effect.
I'm Oluwatobi. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I just graduated college. Love my job, love my new apartment, love my cat.
I'm waiting to see if the cat pops in the frame at some point. It might. Right now our witch is petting it, which is pretty stereotypical if you ask me.
So we go to meet with Oluwatobi, who's our last interview for the day. And they're great. And we have, a lot of interesting conversations about spirituality and practice.
Yeah, so I can go ahead if there's a question that anyone wants to ask.
I would love, we're going out tonight to do some investigations, and I'd love a reading, maybe for the three of us, even if it's one card, to if we're on kind of the right direction with what we've been doing in a show like this, and if we can keep going on this path.
At the end of the interview, they asked us, they told us that they were like, I just got an oracle deck and I'm learning to use it. Could I do an oracle reading? And we're like, yeah, of course. That sounds
cool. Yeah, pull an oracle card.
Would you like to fix it? Do you ask the question?
I feel like I should close my eyes because they're all face up, and I don't want to accidentally pick one that's. We have 42 wild winds.
And Oluwatobi pulls a card called the Wild Winds, and the card is basically just saying like, you're on a journey, you're on this path. And it says pay attention to like signs and numbers. And then the wildest part is that Oluwatobi is like,
do you hear the whispers in the wind? Have you ever been alone in nature when suddenly you hear a word or a sound, but no one is there? Earth Mama speaks to us in many ways, but it takes time and practice to hear her with clarity. At first, you may wonder if it's just your mind playing tricks on you. Don't allow doubt to block the wisdom of the earth. The Wild Winds card commonly appears when a spirit or the universe has sent you messages in the form of synchronicities. Thank you.
That's kind of their whole thing.
That's my whole thing.
That's their
whole actually my whole thing. Like that's my number one, like
that's so
the paranormal
cool.
phenomena of synchronicity is like I won't stop talking about it. Rosa's so sick of hearing about it.
Have you heard the word synchronicities?
A synchronicity is the occurrence of two events that lack any causal relation but still appear intrinsically connected. I always describe synchronicity as something that happens in real life that feels like it was written in fiction. It's the feeling when any number of little pieces, seemingly disparate or disconnected, reveal themselves to be woven together by the red thread of fate. Some believe that a large number of synchronicities can suggest that you're being led towards something meaningful, or that something out there is trying to get your attention. A breadcrumb trail of synchronicities had already begun to form through investigations in New York involving my name, John Keel, my friend and professional weirdo John Tenney, and Tennessee travel plans that hadn't even been set in stone yet. On our first day in Adams, I decided I wanted to shoot an explainer for synchronicities, but forgot to schedule a when or where. So being asked to define the word by Oluwatobi, our final interview subject for the entire investigation, felt like a synchronicity where the trigger was the word synchronicity itself. This confluence of synchronicities, however, wasn't finished with us yet, as the final piece of writing on the Wild Winds Oracle card sent us even deeper into this rabbit hole of weird.
So apparently this is probably the easiest spell you'll ever do, but you shouldn't underestimate its power. Okay, so when you pull the Wild Winds card, or when there's a message you just can't comprehend, hold the jar in one hand and the lid in the other. Stand still outside in nature, preferably in a forest or park with lots of trees surrounding you. Say aloud, Nature spirits speak into the wild winds, that which you have intended for me to know. Wait until you feel the wind blow and scoop the wind into the jar and close the lid. Place the jar beside your bed and ask the wild winds in the jar to enter your dreams and reveal the message. Ooh. When your message is revealed, thank the winds and release them back to Mother Earth.
May I see this? I'm probably gonna.
I have to
don't
say,
write quickly enough.
and this is a little bit of a wild one for me. We interviewed someone earlier, and they gifted us a jar.
You're kidding.
Yeah, it was with a flower from their garden in it, like the way to transport the flower. But someone did give us a jar today, which makes me feel like we should probably do this, right? Because we do have a jar now.
Well, then we'll be back into there tomorrow too. So
Well, and we're also going to the woods, and we do have a jar. So I feel like this might be an even easier one for Fox because we do have a woods jar.
Right, and then and then a place to release them to.
I think we do that tonight, and then tomorrow when you're doing your full ritual, so we do it tonight. We take the message because you're gonna sleep tonight, and you're gonna.
I'm hoping to.
One would hope, and then tomorrow I would say before you do the ritual that you had planned for tomorrow, we just release the wind.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting. We were just at a Botanica, and I bought a Psychic Dreams oil to put on tonight. So if we have the winds, we have the oil, we put it in the bed me and Fox are in. I feel like we might get some winds, the oil dream. We do have a jar. So think about it.
We're gonna need a lid though.
We do have to find a lid.
We can put a lid together.
We can find a lid.
That's I want to say that's too much. It's not too much. It's exactly enough, but at the same time, that's cool though. This is, again, the thing about all of this is it turns me into like, I've got a yarn board and into the thing, but like that's, yeah.
Yeah. This is where I get excited because I was like, we got a jar.
Well, specifically, Rosa's like, that's weird because someone gifted us a jar today. And that's the point where you see me melt where I'm like someone gave us
a jar.
Literally,
we
so Jael handed me a flower in a jar.
And then I was like, and I bought dream oil.
Ointment specifically to get psychic messages from dreams.
So we now had a lot of supplies that we didn't plan on having, but
for a spell that we didn't plan to do.
Hello?
Jael. Hey, okay, so this is wild, I feel.
Yeah.
So we're recording right now. What did you give me? Just so because we didn't catch that, we didn't film that. What did you give me?
It's a zinnia.
It's a zinnia. But what did you put it in?
In a jar.
Here's the wild thing though. He's like that's wild because I picked that flower. He's like, I picked that flower, I got in my truck, and I drove several blocks. And then I thought, that's really hot, I should put it in something.
And I was like, you know what, it's really hot, and I don't want this beautiful flower to completely die on the way there. So I literally pulled back in the driveway, turned the truck off, went back inside, and got a jar. Filled it with water.
That's amazing. I feel like that adds to it. That's incredible.
I just knew it, and there was another. I did a reading for myself this morning, and one of the things that came up for me was this sort of concept of bulldozing myself.
Yeah.
Like one part of yourself wants to do the thing, the other part doesn't, and I had a moment where I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm actually really excited about this.
Yeah.
But when I was in the car and getting ready to leave, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be late. I shouldn't do all this fussing around. And I was like, you know what? Boom, right here. This is the moment. Don't bulldoze yourself. You want to do this thing. Do the thing right the way that you want to. Boom.
That's the fact that it's tied into a reading that you did is also completely perfect.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I wanted to call you to tell you the story, and I also wanted to thank you again for, giving us this piece of a magic ritual that we're going to do tonight.
Yeah, it's great. I'm so happy to have met you guys and to share in that magic and that synchronicity, because it is such a beautiful and a powerful thing, and experiencing it on your own is already really incredible, but when you start to like share that with other people, it just, I don't know, it has some really immense power.
It was a lot of a lot of pieces coming together, a lot of pieces, and I think with how we experience synchronicities and like experience this show, all these pieces coming together were like.
It was like an avalanche of synchronicities that all sort of came together, which is wild. So we go out the second night of investigation, and Ames comes with us, partially because they had expressed interest in joining us for one of the investigations, and partially because they were the only of our interview guests who didn't have like a hand on that ball, that giant synchronicity storm.
Yeah,
so
the giant synchronicity ball. We needed everyone to throw a hand in.
Maybe something will happen tonight and connect them more to this thing.
I think it would be okay to pull him.
Yeah. Oh. How you feeling?
Good. I couldn't catch a lot of it.
Yeah, that's
It
it's
takes
sort
a
of
little bit of practice.
So we go down and we do a couple of things. A couple of us do the Estes. Again, I think it doesn't really pop off until I jump into it.
Or do you want to like hang out with us? Are you like a cool spirit who wants to?
Thinking.
Okay.
I'm thinking. A radio.
Oh yeah, you're using a radio frequency right now. So
Down. We're talking about across. Great.
are you something that's out here in the woods with us?
Feel the one below. It's supposed to come.
Where are you right now?
It's handy.
It's Andy? Damn, Andy, the Bell Witch all along.
I knew it. Never asked.
A lot of people are saying
It's threatening.
Oh, okay. Maybe we should turn back. All right.
It's responsive. It doesn't feel as like groundbreaking as the first night of Estes stuff, but it still feels really responsive and interesting.
Yeah, I definitely felt less out there, and I don't know if it was like just like where we were, or like because it felt like less tethered to things, or like I was kind of getting like a not a like get out vibe, but not that like something was like truly pleased of us being there.
So what's really interesting too is the first night when we did the Estes, I felt like we connected with the two very human things. Like they felt like a very human presence. Every other night after that, it felt like we connected with something that never was human, something that was deeply sort of like energy or nature or sort of older than that. What's really interesting is I talked to Ames later about this, and they let me know that they had felt pulled into the water. And they were like, I'm so glad I was there with people. They're like, something that felt old but not ancient, like a youngish sort of thing, felt like it was pulling them, not in a malicious like trying to get you sort of way, but in like a hey, come to me, join me, like something that doesn't really understand human mortality.
Yeah.
They felt straight up pulled into the water.
Here, why don't I exchange you for glasses, and I'll take this reader.
I kind of want. I'll pull this. I kind of want to switch gears, and I would like to. Fox, how do you feel about trying a Gansfeld experiment? Do you know what that? I'll explain it. A Gansfeld experiment is a sensory deprivation technique where the person inside listens to white noise while experiencing, usually it's done with ping pong balls and a red light. It was originally done as sort of a sensory deprivation and maybe self-hypnosis. You hear something, Andy?
Mm-hmm.
What'd you hear?
Just a car.
A car?
Yeah.
Gotcha. But it came to sort of be used for ESB and sort of psi experiments, and I have sort of a little Gansfeld setup. I'd love to plug Fox in and just sort of
do 3.7, 3.6.
just sort of talk about what you see. And if you don't see anything, that's fine. We can give it a minute.
So first thing, youngish girl running through the forest, kind of looking behind her, running away from something.
Spooky, I hate
That's
that.
no, I'm not a fan of that either.
I think it's going into labor.
Someone's going into labor?
The family knew about it.
lot of strange beeps and boops coming off of Fox right now.
I'm also hearing beeps and boops.
Noise-wise.
But yeah, I mean, what I see from it is just her lying in the bed, sweating profusely, kind of looking labor-esque. With the people around as it would have been. But very hushed kind of situation.
It's like a secret.
Do you want to be put in after her?
Huh?
Are you gonna go in it after her?
I think after this, I think we just do the spell.
Yeah, I feel like honestly, when I felt most connected to something was when you were
When I was in the box, yeah. I kind of want to do the spell and I think call it.
We can Gansfeld tomorrow instead of Estes, or do a Gansfeld and an Estes. I'm fine to do.
We can. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm fine to get hooked up to either.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
When something presents itself to me as a gift from that space, accepting that gift and thanking the space for it, So likewise, I had received one of these mushrooms and I took it with, and during one of the interviews, I kind of wandered off as I'm wont to do. And there was a certain part of the path that every time I walked down it, and as I went down, I found it very tense, like my hand just like clenched up. And the rest of the time I was very calm, And when I came back right at the same area, I felt just like this visceral tension there. And so as I was there, kind of on the ground, there was a little flat stone with some moss on it. And I was like, I'm going to do a nice. And so I put the mushroom down there as kind of an offering to whatever was feeling not great in this space, and kind of said a few words and made along my way. And then on the way back to meet up with everyone, and I had for a long time on the way down kind of had my eyes down, just like looking for stuff. And I hadn't seen this on the way down, but on the way back I actually found some Unamoth wings, which was nice.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was kind of a trade for a trade, and so taking that and thanking it, whatever was there. And likewise, when we got here, I found this wonderful, which I have now dubbed my new special stick. It has some leaves growing on it, despite the fact that it seems like a dead stick.
So it seems like you've already sort of engaged with whatever the energy is out there, and I think again, the reason I was excited about the Natchez Trace is that again, it's very like, there are witch circles, there are witch dances, and so the lore of that place. I had sort of thought maybe that would be a cool place to do the ritual that you prepared to try to commune with the Bell Witch. And I mean, what do you think about that for tomorrow?
I think that'd be great. It feels like a very generous space.
Okay, cool.
So long as you engage with it properly, so long as you're respectful,
of course,
have gratitude and such for it.
And I think that's a great place to sort of release whatever we've taken into the jar back into nature.
Yeah, I think so.
Probably right before you do that ritual.
I think it'd be great.
Sorry, I just looked right into the camera. You
No,
can
it's
edit
okay.
that out.
Look right back into it.
This is Natchez Trace, or part of it, and it's a really long trail that stretches from Mississippi to Nashville, which is where we're at. We're kind of either at the end or the beginning, wherever you wanna look at it. And so I've had a lot of like weird, negative thoughts about this place. Just I don't even know why, but people kind of put it in my head like, this place is haunted. You don't want to go here.
Sure.
So yeah, when was the first time that you even heard about this place?
I was in a car driving back from a stand-up show in Mississippi in Tupelo with two other comics who had lived in Nashville a lot longer than me, and it was already like super scary just driving back on this winding road, and like just weird shit just kept happening. And they're like, oh yeah, we're like close to Natchez Trace, like where there's like witch dances and stuff that happen, and then there are like a lot of like really gruesome murders that happened along this whole trail and what have you. And I was just like, what?
Yeah.
And then they're like, yeah, it's apparently like really haunted, but people like to go hiking through it. And so like this was also like at like 10 p.m. at night, driving just like on a single road trying to get back home. So that was like always my like thought about it. So I always find it interesting when people are like, beautiful Natchez Trace, we're gonna go walk around here. And I'm like, oh, no.
So the next day we drive out
Back to the
Natchez Trace because it felt like when we'd been there the day before, Fox had felt like connected to it. And I know, I was like, this is a witch place, and we brought a witch. So if we're going to do, the plan for the final night of investigation is for Fox to do a ritual to try to summon the Bell Witch. Which way, which one, where to? You face a choice and your indecision grows more awkward every moment. How long can you hold out? Blind faith, intuition, or a lucky guess will guide you. There is so much to be gained if you will act. You need only change one thing for it all to be changed. I think what feels cool about that to me is like, this is sort of a blind moment for us. We're placing faith into what we've learned and how we've sort of investigated in the past couple days, what we've learned from the people we've talked to. I think the indecision is sort of, we've spent a little bit of time putzing around, like figuring out like exactly where we wanted to do this and do this part, but I think we should just get into it. I think there's a lot to be gained, and I think we just sort of jump into what we wanted to do here tonight. Oh, we totally forgot. You did have a weird dream experience.
I had a couple dreams. My first one was kind of a lucid-ish dream. However, I couldn't control. I was like between asleep and awake, couldn't control it. And I don't usually see things in my dreams. Like, I'm a very audio person. I don't see like images. And I saw the image of birds. It felt different than like how dreams usually are. Like, I felt like I was both awake and asleep. Like, I wasn't fully in either space, which is strange. I've never had it.
Yeah.
That's not how I.
It also, you said it was just in like a circle. Like,
It was in my, like, usually dreams, like, you feel like you're just walking around. Like, you're in your body and you're walking around. Even the boring ones, like, you're in a space at least. This was like me watching a movie in an old, like through an old camera. This was like me, I did not feel like I was moving. I felt like very much I was still in the bed, and this was being played to me. And it was just a circle, like kind of a vignette hole almost. And it felt like it was in my forehead. It didn't feel like it was.
Which is where the ointment had been applied.
Yeah, which is where we put the ointment. It felt like it was where I had dabbed the oil. So, that felt important. I believe they were grackles. We've taken some time to research what they were today. I believe they're grackles.
We don't have a payoff on this dream. We don't really know what this meant. It was really interesting. A lot of times blackbirds are sort of seen as a negative omen. I don't really read it as that. It didn't feel ominous, I don't think.
It felt a little ominous, but I don't know if it was because of the birds or if it was truly just the feeling of not being able, like having a new experience that is non-controllable.
Normally I don't dream, but I didn't have, or normally I do dream.
Yeah.
But I didn't actually have any dreams last night. I did the third eye anointing as well, but I didn't have any dreams throughout the course of the evening. Once everyone was up and about in the morning, I woke up briefly and then I went back to sleep after everyone left. And I did have a dream at that point, which was pretty, which was very visceral and very clear.
Yeah.
Which I didn't feel a lot of like emotion from it or a lot of like anxiety. And just for trigger warning purposes, I'm not going to really go into it, and I don't feel comfortable going into it. But it was very much about not being in control and being in a position that you're not able to have any like bodily autonomy or control over, which I didn't really think a lot about until really just now. But whenever it was mentioned about it actually being a spirit that was put into.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if maybe the spirit was sort of just struggling to get out.
Yeah, a place, but it was about like someone like forcibly
Interesting.
having control over you.
Yeah, interesting.
A friend of mine, who is a necromancer named Mortellus, lets me know, like, hey, you might have captured a spirit in that, so don't expose the jar to sunlight, which we hadn't. And they're like, yeah, if you expose it to sunlight, it could be like damaging to the spirit in there.
Yeah, if we accidentally cut a spirit.
So we wrap it up, sort of like light tight, can't see it. And they're like, and you know, probably like give it some rum when you release it, just to sort of appease it.
And so for the safety of the spirit, oh, Rosa, do you have that wine?
Yeah, it's in the bag.
Amazing.
So it's like, yeah, I'll buy a can of wine because we just need like some wine. We don't need a bottle. And so I'm looking at all the cans of wine, and like most of them are like, you know, like Babe Rosé or whatever, like, you know, like bad canned wine. One of them I was like, oh, this one looks fine because it has it has a bunch of like snakes and berries and like skulls, and it's like, it's kind of like dark,
spooky.
Yeah, it's like dark purple and green, you know. So I was kind of joking with Andy, and I was like, Andy, like, it's getting too spooky for you? Was last night too spooky? And I was like, oh, do you believe in this stuff, Andy? Like, I'm just, you know, being a dick. But Andy was like, oh, yeah, well, actually, like, you know, this was really interesting. I wasn't that, like, I felt spooky, like, things were spooky last night, but I'm not, like, I wasn't, like, super scared. I was like, so what has to happen? Like, do we have to be, like, chased by a Frankenstein for you to be scared? You know, joking around.
That'd be pretty scary, though.
That would be pretty. And he goes, oh, probably snakes.
So Fox upends the wine, releases the jar, and starts to set up for the ritual that she's gonna do.
There's like some incense she's staking in the ground. There's some other. There's
you acknowledge the four cardinal directions. You acknowledge the wind and the four elements, and Fox picks up this staff that she had found earlier in the Natchez Trace, like the day before, and pretty quickly after she picks that up, from the left,
we see a snake.
A snake. And we're originally like, what kind of snake is that? I'm like, maybe it's like, it's small. It's probably not that big of a deal. It's not small. I thought it was small.
It's not small.
I'm very wrong about the size of the snake.
Yeah, I wonder if Snake did want me to come out of the circle.
Yeah, no, stay in the circle. If
I'm staying.
If a snake is trying to seduce a woman out of a circle, that seems like a bad sign.
Yeah, it's probably true.
And I have this little nagging voice inside my head that's like, there's another snake that's gonna come. Like, I literally am like, we're gonna see multiple snakes.
Which, we looked into it, it is kind of the copperhead mating season. It wasn't like directly in it,
No.
so usually copperheads are never found in like that close to each other. This is the one time of year which this isn't the strangest thing, but however, this was still strange in every other thing about how
another
they were
snake
acting.
shows up is what
We
we're
get a
getting
second
at.
snake.
From the right, like coming out of the bushes.
Like flanking us.
Now these two snakes continue to just hover. They're by us, they're like rearing up. They are staring again at Fox, which is weird because she's doing this summoning ritual.
I mean, this feels magic. I mean, like, I know we're scared, but it feels magical to me.
I agree, especially because of Dionysus.
Yep. Fox, the snake is coming towards you, Fox, and I'm actually a little bit nervous about it because it is actually coming straight towards you.
I am a little worried that possibly that Fox somehow communed with a snake.
Eventually, we do leave. Fox doesn't want to leave. Fox feels very safe, and like, I'm not gonna say like Fox would get bitten by a snake if she stayed in there, but I also like I'm not willing to risk that when we're filming.
I'm not. Well, here's the thing. I love that Fox felt safe. I would have gotten bitten by the snake. I was not in a like, I truly believe that, like, these snakes wished me bad intent.
But it didn't feel like they wished bad intent to me. It just felt like they were like, hey,
get out.
This is not your space right now.
So yeah,
we got chased out of the woods by some snakes. Well, me and Dash did. Do you want to say how it felt being out there
you can talk
alone?
about that a little bit if you want.
I felt very comfortable.
Yeah.
Do you think the snakes were talking for you, or were they just living their lives, having a little day?
I think for the most part they were having a little day, and I've actually done, I went out with a friend of mine who studies copperheads before, and just knowing the nature of them, like they really don't actually mess with people too much. I kind of just, generally speaking, they just have little days. Like usually they're just kind of cruising around.
Sure.
And if they get too close and they feel threatened, they're more likely going to turn around and be like, oh, beep.
Yeah.
And
the weird thing to me is I grew up like hiking in a lot of places with snakes, and honestly the thing that felt like interesting from this experience for me was usually when you like walk, you're walking around, you're talking, you're being loud, there's like people, they usually just like kind of jut off after they see you, and these ones like were looking at me and like staying with me, and like one, when Dash's partner Jules left with like this, like to walk out, one of the snakes followed them as they walked out, like almost it was saying like, yes, here's the door, please go. So I think for me, maybe they wanted you alone, but I felt very like they did not want me.
I picked up the same thing, and I think one of the things that we're in nature a lot with this, and we've been dealing with a lot of nature, and there's been a lot of like last night felt really comfortable and welcoming, and like even though there were bugs, like it felt really like this is a safe place for you to be. And I think just the fact that we got sort of pincer movement flanked by a set of copperhead snakes, and the fact that again, like when you would show a light, like they were like eyes locked on you for a lot of it. And so to me, at least what I was picking up was they were keenly aware that something was happening, and it didn't feel like natural snake behavior. It felt like these snakes were aware of something, and I, in an effort to be respectful to the forest and forest things and nature things, the vibe that I was completely getting was like, this isn't the place for us to be right now,
I felt like I was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's interesting because like when
totally.
we left, did it feel good?
It felt wonderful.
See, like maybe we had to leave for like the moment to happen, because like I think maybe it wasn't pushing her out, it was pushing us out and Andy.
It was a really fitting end, I feel, to this investigation, because when you get into the Bell Witch story, it starts with John Bell shooting at an animal he doesn't understand. And I feel like you look at that sort of interaction with nature, and I think for us being there, seeing those snakes, it was very much like, hey, this is nature, this is spooky, how are you going to engage? And for us, in the right engagement felt like a disengagement, to be like, hey, you know what, we're going to respect this, we're not going to come at this with violence, or because we're not trying to attack snakes, we're not trying to mess with snakes.
I don't need to.
I like snakes.
I don't need to fight a snake.
And it just felt like a very much like, it felt tied in with the owl and the praying mantis and all the bats and all the other animals that we've sort of like seen acting maybe like larger than life or big. It felt like a very like natural world instruction, and the instruction was to not be there. It felt like a good sort of like wrap up for the investigation, to me at least.
I didn't know what we were going to find coming out here to Tennessee and Clarksville or Adams, wherever we've sort of been this weekend. I didn't expect to find anything. I never wanted this show to be a show where we're gonna catch Bigfoot on camera, because that's disingenuous and sensationalist, and I think very silly. I think we met a lot of interesting people, and I think we had an experience that was magical and fantastical and interesting. I think about the Bell Witch, and I don't even like calling it that because I don't like naming it after this family, but I think a lot about how this entity was used as a smokescreen for evils perpetrated by the men in that time. The evils of John Bell participating in a system of slavery, the evils of Betsy's teacher taking advantage of a young girl, I think about those evils, and I think about this entity that just existed and was powerful and maybe dangerous, but not evil, right? And I'm not saying men, it's not about maleness being evil. I think a lot about what Jael talked to us about in terms of redefining masculinity and what being male can mean. And I think that's powerful. And I think that that gender alchemy is a lot of, I think, what being trans is about. When I think about the evils of humanity using this entity, the Bell Witch, as a smokescreen to deflect away from it, I think a lot about how politicians today treat trans people and queer people. There's this fear mongering, right? To hold power, they tell you that trans people want to go in bathrooms or queer people are going to recruit your kids, and it's the same. I feel that same kinship. I think strangeness and queerness are linked intrinsically, and I think I can't explain everything that happened this weekend. I think it was really magical, and I'm not done. I don't know where we're going next, but we're going somewhere, and we'll see you there, I guess.
Oh, hey, what's up?
Rosa, I've been thinking about what happened in the woods and everything leading up to it, and I feel like we got it wrong a little bit.
Okay, how so?
Les got it wrong, and I think we just focused on the wrong thing. I think that on the first night of investigation, we were very clearly in communication and directed by a thing that we sort of jokingly called the gay director ghost. And I think that it set us up with a narrative about the jar synchronicity and the spell synchronicity and the snake synchronicity. And I feel like that led to your dream of a black bird. And the person who I've been talking to, just a friend of mine who's a magic practitioner, this whole time while we were shooting, their whole thing is black birds, and that's their logo and their iconography. And I was talking to them, and it's crazy, but it connected to the name that's been haunting me and like surrounding my life for the past 6 years. Yeah, Robert Graves.
Robert Graves.
That's in this now. That's connected to this now. And I feel like I know where we have to go next. And I feel like we have to go to North Carolina.